Thank you, Heike, and thank you for having me, and thanks to the DiLCo network for inviting me here. I would prefer to keep my mask on because I have a cold. My tests were negative, but it's for you as well as for me. So if everything works well, if somehow you cannot hear me, then just wave with the hand. And you can also ask questions during the talk if something isn't clear. And there will be a question session in the end anyway.
Can you hear me or Marcus or
Adrien? Yes, we can hear you, Gregor. Is everything okay? Okay, we can hear you. Okay, so I'll start first with a few context elements. So why would we need corpora and web corpora in the first place? An example is, for instance, word order and grammaticality in German.
Open your mic at your computer, the Zoom mic.
Ah. Okay, can you hear me now, Gregor?
Yes.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Okay, so the first example is, yes, but how do I put it? Because now there's the toolbar on top of the screen. Okay.
If you go down, it will just fade away.
Okay. So the first example concerns word order and grammaticality in German, and the word atlas of language structure says it's undecided because of the lack of clear evidence. And then the interest would be, how do we know, for instance, weil plus V2, how do we know how these sentences are built, and how do we know where the verb comes, for instance? Another example would be in the earlier times of computational linguistics, in a seminal article about Swiss German and about context treeness of languages, Stuart Schieber had a few examples documenting Swiss German data, but from America, so to say, and he had 4 native speakers, which he called informants. And based on what the informants said, he wrote a whole article about Swiss German. So today it would seem a little bit curious, but at the time it was normal. It's just symbolic for what was happening. It's nothing wrong with this article in particular. But as he said himself, what if the data are wrong? And he says, I have no answer. I have no adequate response. The data can be wrong, and then the whole article is built on sand. So here the interest of corpora and of web corpora is to gather real-world language use, just to make sure we all agree on this. So in the first times when web data became available, there was a kind of rush to web data, and at first people thought we could have a kind of web as corpus, meaning that we take the whole web and the whole web is our corpus and we can make research on it. It was a loosely defined concept, and at first search engines were used a lot to somehow, sometimes with a front end, sometimes without, in order to make sure that we can make a few queries that are a little bit more refined. And next, 2004 was the first offline corpora. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So 2004 saw the first method to build corpora that are then, thank you, that are then offline, meaning that we have web data or a sample of web data that we can query at our institutions, for instance. And then in 2010, the Sketch engine started, which is a commercial linguistic search engine for numerous languages and has become a standard in the field. So we see that there was a series of opportunistic approaches, but then things narrowed down because it became more and more complicated. That's how, for instance, in the case of search engine, you have to run a company in order to be able to offer a corpus infrastructure for all languages. Also, what do we expect, or what do we expected from large corpora? At first, it was the more data is better data paradigm, meaning that whatever unclean data you get into the system, the statistical algorithm will smooth it out in the end. So meaning that if your data is not clean, if it's not in the right language from some part, if it's not the right text or the right kind of text, you will still be able to get frequency information that's reliable, and the unclean data will disappear, so to say, or will not be visible or not be a problem. But that still asks the question, when do we stop? When does more data is better data stop to be a principle to drive research? And at least for 10 years, since 10 years now, it has become clear that we cannot build on this web as corpus approach. We have somehow to do web for corpora, meaning that we will take samples, and a whole lot of questions arise on this topic, meaning that how do we take a decent sample from the web, and that's what I will talk about today. So the web as corpus paradigm is outdated. We have not enough machine power, because often the data collection part is the first step of a project, so you don't want to build a whole corpus infrastructure just to study a certain question in linguistics, for instance. They also have copyright infringement issues involved. And in the whole, there was no real change of paradigm. Like, web corpora are still corpora, and they're built according to the same criteria. So it wasn't the kind of revolution that maybe the first ones working on it were expecting. And when you see the reality, so this is an image of what the web is or could be, or what a portion of the web was in 2012. So it's a series of links, here a series of edges and links, and you have to find your way through this. So this is the open question: how do we do it in a way that we build a corpus that is somehow representative of something, or a corpus that says something about the topics we expect it to be? And the questions that we ask are, so we have these web pages, we have these links. How do we find more web pages? The answer would be web crawling, for instance. How can you assess the value of the web pages that you gather? An answer could be PageRank, the algorithm that Google used in the first place. And more important question: what does all have to do with humanities and social sciences? Because honestly, you're trained to work on other questions or other types of questions that the computer science algorithm like PageRank. And an easy and reasonable answer could be, well, yes, you can definitely let other people do it. You don't have to. You can work on existing corpus infrastructure, or you can work on existing resources. However, don't use Google. That would be the first point. As people at first did it, because in this seminal article by the lexicographer Alan Kilgareth, he made clear that there is a number of reasons why Google just isn't enough. So you cannot really ask for certain linguistic information like lemmatization or part-of-speech tags. The search syntax is limited, but most of all, the engine counts are arbitrary. So you cannot really, if you do one research on one computer and then you do another query from another computer, you will get different numbers, or also on different days and so forth. And the search hits are only an approximation. You cannot really use it, even on a quantitative level. And so an alternative solution, and that's also what I'm talking about now, is to try to build one's own web corpus by working like the search engine, well, on a very small scale. And the method didn't really change. So you have to download, you have to crawl eventually, you have to download, then you have to clean, and if you need to deduplicate the data, then linguistically annotate it and load it into some corpus query tool, or query it by yourself, or index it, or just leave that to others, but these steps are still usable today. And that's how you can give reliable figures that are reproducible in time, and how you can support linguistic research. So now, concerning web corpora. So web corpora are like traditional corpora. You have it's a construct. A corpus is always a series of decisions that you've taken, and it's good to take notes of the decision that you take in the process, because sometimes you forget about it, and then at a conference 12 months later, somebody asks, but why is this text included and not this one? And there is a good reason, but you forgot about it. So it's always a series of decisions. Also technological decisions, and it's perfectly okay to say, well, I couldn't include it because my money for the server ran out, or the project didn't have much more money for the server. And also you will be faced with the historical importance of representativeness and categorization, meaning people will want to know what is the corpus representative about, or which text categories, like which text genres are included in the corpus. And also, the web in itself is not suitable for linguistic research. You cannot say it's the web, so you will have to find a portion of it and to justify the choices that you've made. So now there are two main types of corpora, I would say. First, you can try to make a good sample in the way that it's usable for a variety of purposes, and then you will try to entail the largest possible amount of text and text types. And the ambition is to become a reference, maybe by the size, and not by the decision that you've taken. This is especially useful if you're trying to derive statistics on norms or uses. Then you need a wide array of texts. And so the construction is often a project of its own, or at least it's a little bit more complicated. You have to perform extensive web crawling. You have to pre- and post-process everything that you have, and usually it's so much data that you will need some kind of database experience or a database infrastructure and storage solution to store it. What you can do on a smaller scale, for a one-person project, is you can make your own sample, an ad hoc corpus, a specialized corpus on the topic you're focusing on. And then you will know which text you gather. You have prior knowledge, you have the control, so you can be opportunistic about it, but usually you know where you're headed. And your goal will be to provide a better coverage of a specific written text genres or text types. For instance, in the first talk we saw Reddit as an example. A Reddit corpus sheds light on a certain social network and a certain way how people talk. And this is a specific corpus. And what you will do is you will crawl it, or you will just have a list of sources which you know, so by hand. Then you will store it as a corpus, even if it's just a series of TXT files. And hopefully and possibly you will use standardized formats for others to reuse your corpus, if you wish to, or if you want to. So in the end, you have these two different approaches, just to make things clear, because so on the one hand, you can do everything by hand and know what you're doing and be very careful about it. On the other hand, you will have much more data. It won't be that clean, but it's the only way to do it. Like you need instruments, and you need somehow a way to go forward without spending too much time on it. And you will have to make sure that your users or the people who read your research articles know which is the approach that you, in order to make sure there is no misunderstanding here. Also a remark, like some people tend to conflict corpora and tools. Like to some people, this isn't clear that a given corpus can be taken out of a certain query engine or a certain infrastructure and used somewhere else, or that some artifacts or some way of working with the corpus are due to the research infrastructure or the software that you use and not the corpus itself. It might be secondary, but it's not always clear. So I think it's interesting to stay modular also in the way you think about it, and always make clear that you can export the data or just use them somewhere else, or that you can change the front end, or you can change the way you access it. And finally, also concerning the background, depending on where you stand, you will have a different way to talk about your corpus and to justify your decisions, to come back to the justification or to the scientific apparatus. For instance, in linguistics, if you're working like corpus-based, you will, for instance, answer the question, for which study and according to which rules did I build this corpus? And if you're corpus-driven in mind, you will not exactly know why you've built the corpus, but you will be able to say, now I can observe this and that. If you're in NLP, it's mostly empirical indicators, so you will, for instance, talk about the accuracy of tool X on corpus Y, and you will, for instance, use out-of-domain data, as it's called, or transfer learning, to see how you can adapt your models to the new corpus. Computer science is also different. Usually you have a framework you want to apply on data, and the corpus is then a use case. So it's just a few examples to name the differences that arise from your background. So now, I'm going to get a little bit more concrete as we go on, and in the end I will show a solution to build ad hoc corpora. For now, so where do you start? So you start with a few questions. What is relevant to you, and where can you find it? So this can depend on the audience, the intended audience, the language used. Also, feasibility is a huge criteria. For instance, can you access the text? What will be the text quality after processing, and also after naive processing, so to say, so that you don't need hours to delve into the topic, but you apply a tool that you found, and how good is the text that you get? Then, how much information do we want to take into account? For instance, do we want the whole text? Do we want specific parts? Do we want just a study on the titles? Are metadata useful to you? For instance, the authorship, or the whole, do you want to get a whole thread? If it's a forum, for instance, with all the correct answer, who answers to whom, and so forth. Are you interested in hashtags? This kind of question. And then you need a way, once you gather the data, to make sure that you have everything you need. So in the first case, where you have control about the source, you know what you're downloading and processing. So you could say, okay, I have 100 out of 10, 100 out of 100. I know what I wanted, and I have it now. Or you can use heuristics on the content. For instance, by a quantitative benchmark, you look at the most frequent words, the most frequent n-grams. If this doesn't make sense to you, it means there's something wrong with the data. Or if it's too unexpected, too far from what you were expecting, it's probably not the corpus you intended to build. And you can also make a random probe, so you take a document at random, or you take 10 of them at several data points or several points in the corpus, and you just look at the text in full as a human, and you try to see if it's what you wanted. This is in one case, the post hoc evaluation. I think that this image is just to make sure, like you're underwater, you don't exactly know what you're getting. The difference is you're not damaging the environment, or you're just making copies here of things. You're not removing fish out of the sea. You're copying them, but basically it's the same. Is that you don't know where you're going. You don't know how much you're going to get, and you need some way to assess what you have in the end. And the other way is like here with butterflies. You know what you want, and you collect it, and you pinpoint it to your pin board, and then you always know where you are and where you're headed. But depending on the approach you need, it's a different kind of access to the data and of evaluation. So now, concerning starting points and ideas, so if you take an open-end approach, you will need seeds. That is a series of web pages or home pages, for instance, and you will hop from site to site or from page to page, or between users if you're on social network, until you've reached a certain end that you fixed, for instance, 100 users. If you are focused, you can do what's called focused web crawling, and you design criteria to narrow the search field, meaning that, for instance, you only want text about sports, and you will restrict your collection by this topic and try to stay in the same topic. So the starting point is usually URLs or a platform. I will mostly talk about URLs here because the platform requires a platform-based solution. It's not nothing generic in nature. So where do you find URLs in the first place? You can use the search engine. They may not be as good as a corpus, but you can use them to find text to include in a corpus, and the bootcat method works well. It's about random inputs. So you use a random series of words and you see what you get. Then you can use already existing lists or collections, for instance, from other research projects that make URL lists available. You can use Wikipedia. There are marketing agencies using Wikipedia to place their resources, but usually the links on Wikipedia are more reliable than any link that you would find on the web. At least I've done some research on it, and it seems to be true. You can use the social networks not for the text in itself, but for the links that people post on social network, and then use them. For instance, you can take very famous accounts and see if they post links. It doesn't happen that much, but you can still use it. And the mistake I did, I only looked for links it was 2013, 14, on social networks that are now not existing anymore. And I was so interested in the links that I didn't back up the text. So even if you're only interested in the links, you can always make a backup of the text. Who knows? Maybe it will be interesting. And you can also use pre-existing resources, but you need a selection method. For instance, the common crawl is a common archive of the web, which has many texts, and it has been used in quantitative studies, especially in computer science, but it has its bugs, because you don't know, like people crawl the web for you. People looked for a way through the web, and you're going their way, but you don't know exactly what it is or which kind of decision they took, so you have to look carefully at the data. But the good thing is that you're not on the web. If you're using what they have, you're using a copy of the web. It doesn't solve the copyright problem, but it solves the access problem, because you can always retrieve everything they have. It doesn't disappear in time. And the Internet Archive is the same kind of a copy, but a different way to process it, but it can be a bit slow, and it's potentially patchy, because both resources, compared to the web that is live, they won't have each and every web pages. They will have made decisions. So if you want a whole news website, for instance, you will miss some part of the content and not know why, but that's, the good thing is that it will not disappear. So now I will go a bit more into detail in the post-hoc evaluation. You have to find some kind of threshold, some kind of signal-to-noise ratio, and this can be through formal and quantitative checks, which I'm going to go more into detail here. And just one thing I'd like to highlight is that you have to make sure the content is adequate to your research goals. For instance, there's a lot of pornography on the web, and the common crawl data is full of pornography. Maybe you want this. Maybe you don't, but you have to assess like how much. A concrete use case is there is a little bit of porn websites in my web corpora in Berlin, and it wasn't a problem until somebody looked for terms related to horses. And it sounds silly, but because it's a typical case, like, but the other thing, like, and it wasn't so funny. It was about Holocaust denial, and it only became clear if you look for terms related to Holocaust denials. Otherwise, you have this dark edges, like swinging around, and you don't see them. So in that case, pornography stayed, but the rest I manually deleted the text. But it's always interesting to keep an open mind and see exactly what you have. So now concerning the quantitative evaluation, you have a great deal of variation, both at collection and at document level. Even in a single text, you can have several segments, several kind of genres of several types of texts, and you have to be ready to discard a great deal of text. It's normal. It's how web corpora are built, but it requires some kind of threshold or idea of what is a text and what isn't a text, what should be included in the corpus. And the thing is, you will also have scraps and shreds from things that the tools output. Like you rely on your tools, and sometimes your intention is good, but the tools process the text badly, and then you have to take a decision. And also, for instance, is a tag cloud a text? Is a directory a text? Is a classified add a text? You have to decide. I would say like a tag cloud is really not really desirable. Directory maybe, and classified add, it starts to get more interesting. But so during my PhD, I had this idea of a model just to make sure that you see what I'm hinting at. Like you have web pages, you have web text, then you have texts that are well-formed, and then you have coherent text. But sometimes the texts are, everything looks okay on a formal level, but the text doesn't make any sense. For instance, because it's machine-generated or badly machine-generated. Then you have to take a decision also. This is an example. This is a classified ad for a car. But the tool didn't output the whole text, or maybe the whole text wasn't on the web page because you had to click to see more. So part of it makes sense, and other parts don't. Especially in the end, you have this British postal codes, which are like, these are no words, like 5px. But then again, maybe it won't be noise, or it won't be that noisy in your corpus, depending on what you want to do this. But if you study like word frequencies with text like this, you're going to have skewy word frequency profiles. You have to decide if it's really what you want. But then again, people who work with text like this usually have so much text in the end that it gets diluted in the whole mass. But I still think this is somewhere very near the limit. And we annotated this text at the time at the FU Berlin, and we didn't agree on. You didn't agree on it. So we were several annotators, and we had a very low annotator agreement on this. So I don't think this should be part of the corpus, but people did. And you will always have, it's the kind of the decisions that you need to take. Now, just also from my PhD, like just an idea how you can classify the text and how you can make sure that the texts are correct or on the formal level, at least expected. This is a logistic regression. I saw before on the screen, what is a logistic regression? It was a tab on the, I think it was on the previous laptop. So this is early machine learning, you might say. No, it's a series of correlations that the computer establishes between criteria and features extracted from the text. The idea is you have here the significance, it's what counts on the right, and we see that formal criteria like words, how many words are there per line, how many discourse markers are there in the text, what's the proportion of punctuation, so not too much, not too low, same for spaces, and also if you have too many uppercase characters, it's somehow not the text that you want. So these are criteria that can be useful, but you can find your own. Just the last one is funny, it's proportion of t. It has a weak statistical significance. It probably means something related to the language. We were looking for text in English, and maybe if the proportion of t changes, it stops to be English, and so that's why it was somehow useful as a criteria, but I wouldn't use it. I just include it here to show that it can go on and on and on. But you can make statistical significance tests of some kind, also machine learning, to find criteria and to just use like discourse markers, for instance, is a good idea. And even the number of words per line. If you have only titles, or if you have a list of addresses, the list of addresses would be discarded because there are not enough words per line. So it's a simple criteria. And then you have the metadata problem. If you have a lot of text, but you don't know exactly what they are, or when or where they were written and so forth, and where they were published, it's like with shelf marks in a library, you lose the data. You don't know what you have because you don't have the descriptors corresponding to your data. And for us in lexicography, dates and source types are paramount. A text without date and without a source cannot be used because we just don't know. We cannot follow the word creation trends, and we cannot follow the words through time. So you need somehow to find your descriptors, or descriptors that are valuable to you or to your research community, to make the data searchable, provide a nice overview, and relate to others in the research field. Questions so far? Or so I'm just going to skip a little bit about technical issues. We can go back to this if you want, but basically, like, the web changes all the time. That's the main problem. You will have to get access to the text. That's another problem. And on client side, you will have connection and bandwidth issue, storage, memory, and format issues. Now, there are things you cannot access, and it's also a problem I'd like to highlight. You have a lot of paywalls, cookies, logins, and so forth, and you need a specially crafted solution. There is no generic solution to this problem. If you really want to access a website that's behind a login, then there are ways to do this, but it will be probably different for each website. Then you have the so-called dark web. You have to design the navigation specially for it. And you have social networks, last but not least. So the ideas would be, you can look for what's called a surface scraper, like a scraper without login, because if you log in, they will rate limit you on the API, so they will limit the access to the social network. If you don't log in, you can crawl as much as you can. And so it could be a good idea not to log in, actually. You will always find tool for it, like for Facebook, for Twitter, at least there are tools. If you're an academic, sometimes that gives you advantage, for instance, for the Twitter API for academic research. Or you can use an already made dataset, for instance, for Reddit, such datasets are available. Then there are surfaces or text hidden somewhere you won't be able to access, or at least not with the common tools. Like you have text and images, are you interested in it or not? Even if it's people demonstrating on the street, most of all there is text, it's interesting. But you need to devise a special way to access this text, otherwise you will just see there was an images here. And memes or GIFs, then you have videos and video subtitles. Subtitles is text, but then again you need a special access for it. You have documents without clear sources or metadata. You have multimedia or embedded content. That's the part of the problem you might reach, and you need to find your way through it. You need to find if you want this or not. And a brief remark on what you do with the data in the end. So the credit goes to Franzi Martas. It's on the top corner. So here I would say the black versioning forest is not to be missed. It's like you will have several corpus versions, and sometimes you don't know which version you're referring to, or you put out. You release several versions and then your users get confused. So for corpora, it's not to be, like external hard drive now, it's less of a problem. Data loss, it's really a problem in metadata, as I said. So it's really something that and synchronization. Like somehow it's related to versioning. It's for your software or for your corpus, you have to make clear which version it is and from which year. And most of all, give your users a way to cite it properly or to use it properly or to understand what it's about. So now I'm going to present the tools I'm working on or I'm working with every day. And you could use it as well to derive text from the web. So first of all, why is it hard? We see here collaboration with Gaël Lejeune from Sorbonne University. Here are a series of tools extracting text from HTML documents, so HTML to TXT, for a series of languages. English, Chinese in green, Polish, Russian in red, and Greek in gray. And it's also older text, so rather from the beginning of the 2010, 2011. And it's just to show you with a certain accuracy measure and precision, recall and precision. And because when you see the F measure, for instance, you see the way things are evaluated also in research, it's a good way. Like you see the F-score. The F-score is somehow a combination of precision and recall, but here you see a scatter plot what can happen. There are tools which are systemically bad for certain languages because they're evaluated on English. So for English, they will work well, especially newspaper here. So all the English points are okay, but the Chinese points are way off. And there are tools which will work in a mixed way, especially readability is interesting because it somehow works not so bad for Chinese. And my tool is mixed, but this gives a better F-score. So F, for logical reasons, we see it here, but depending on your context, it might be the tool of choice or not. So just to make sure that there's always something behind the synoptic tables that you see. Yes, so I'm skipping this, maybe coming back later. So the interest of the tool is that it can download text, extract it for you with metadata and possibly with comments. And you can also discover and explore potential sources. You can use it from Python, R, or on the command line. There is an experimental guided user interface, but I cannot test it because I lack the platforms to test it, so it's really experimental. But if you're proficient with, or even if you're not that proficient, if you know how to use one of these tools, you can access it. The features are that you can discover text. I will show how. You can also manage URLs in some way, and it will be seamless. You won't see what happens behind the scenes, but it will download the text for you or process text that you already have. You will get most of all the main text with an accuracy of 90%, depending on the language, depending on the context. You will get common metadata, formatting elements. If you use the XML output, you will have like paragraph, you will know where the titles are, where the lists are, where the quotes are. Quotes are really interesting because sometimes it's not like you have this relationship. There is an author to the text, but the author is quoting somebody, it's good to know it. And if there are comments, for instance, especially block comments, you might get them, so it could be worth trying to do a study on it. And the output formats, you should be familiar with at least some of them. So TXT, CSV, JSON. This doesn't include the text formatting. Only XML includes the text formatting and the page structure, but the two, CSV and JSON, does have metadata. I can come back to this later if you're interested in how to use it with Python. I will just conclude with how can you navigate a website? So you have a home page, for instance. The software can give you the sitemap and the newsfeed. So if it's a newspaper, it's going to have both, usually. If it's a simple blog, it's unclear, but you can try it. So it gives you an overview of the pages on the web page, so on the website. So, and then you have a clear directory on what there is to look for, and you can sift it by hand, or you can just see, okay, it looks good, and then download everything. Or you can try to navigate with the software and hop from page to page. It's not that certain and not that easy or reliable, but it will work as well, and the software will try to map the website for you. So concretely, and to conclude, so how do we build a corpus with this tool and with what I described today? So first you need a series of home pages, or you need URLs, or you need previously downloaded HTML documents. So either you take pre-existing one from a common crawl or from other projects, or you make a list by hand even. Then you can try to work on the URL list, like you can try to select for the URLs that are most likely in German, for instance. But it's optional. Then you download and you process the document, and you keep a copy at best. It's straightforward with the software. You control and you refine your corpus with what I said, so content, maybe formal criteria. You see if everything is there that you need. Then you need some way to access it, so you use it with the software of your choice, or you just make blind searches in it as you want. And if you want, you can share the corpus by bundling a list of URL and the how-to for the software. Because as you may see this afternoon, I'm not sure, about Twitter, there's something about Twitter that's called rehydration. It means you have a list of tweets ID, and you don't share the tweet themselves because you're not allowed to. So you share a list of ID, and then the software retrieves the IDs for you. And at the end, you have the same tweets if they have not been deleted. The same can be done with URLs, and with this software, you can just share a list of what you have, and somebody else can use my software to get the pages from the web if they are still there. So that way, you don't have any copyright problem, and you can tell people, here is what it's in my corpus, and my corpus is reproducible. The feedback loop, if you're interested, so you can always contact me. You can write an issue on GitHub. That's where the software lives. Or we can even cooperate on it if you're interested. Here is how you can cite it. And if you cite it, I will put you, if I find you, I will use you in, I will here put you in your used by. For now, there are a few research institutions using it, especially Sciences Po in Paris, and also Media Labs in America. But many also individual users. And thank you for your attention, and I hope we can have a nice discussion. And I would like to thank paracetamol and caffeine for helping me make these slides.
Thanks very much. We have, as I told Gregor, that we will maybe take a couple of minutes longer. We have time for questions, and we will also make the slides available afterwards. So, because there was a lot of information that you could probably not copy all down. Okay. So the Q&A session will be that you ask questions, and Adrien will repeat them for sake of the recording. Okay. So the floor is open. Then maybe okay.
Thank you very much for this. I wonder about your thoughts about the calibration of the size and the origin of such corpus. From a sociolinguistic viewpoint, crawling the web per se is pointless because any social determination is lost. So how do we find a level, a calibration of crawling the web that is not too large as to lose any social condition and not too small as to lose the advantages of the quantitative corpus? What are your best practice hints for that?
Yeah, thanks. So I will sum up the question. It's about finding the right scale from a social linguistics point. That is a web page that is with the markers, with some kind of marker of its importance or of its relationship with the rest, right? It's PageRank does it. It's what Google does. Where Google has some idea of the authority of the page, of the position of the page in the whole web graph. The problem is you cannot know this if you don't have the web graph. But you can, for instance, you can ask Google what it thinks of the page, and it's called the like authority rank or something like, and it would give you a quantitative indicator of how famous the page is, or how well read it is, or especially how well linked it is. In fact, it could be a way to, but you will have to use like external indicators. There are lots of also marketing firms offering tools like this because they want you to sell to buy their what they're offering. So they first assess your web page and say you could improve this or that, but you could use it to give you an idea of how the page is located, and then you will based on these indicators you would have famous pages or non-famous pages, and you will be able to make your own balance. But I guess your point. I understand your point. It's you could also go completely at random, and then you would if you have a random method on a huge list of URL, then you have a random sample. but it doesn't quite answer your question, but it would be a way to go. Because if you, yeah, if you go beyond randomness, your sample is going to be skewed. Yeah, that's normal. I don't have a precise answer to this.
You just click once on the slide because then the Zoom will just on the slide, just click
okay.
on the side and start.
Here? No.
No, just to the.
Because yeah, okay.
So you mentioned somewhere net etiquette, but you skipped over it. Maybe you want to explain on this point.
Yes, you have a question of fair access. So it's about netiquette or about about the crawl politeness. Is that if you go blindly and just take as much as you can from a website, you might get banned. So then you cannot access the text anymore. So you have to find ways for this not to happen, and the software includes them. At best, it's the best effort to include them. So so to take more time, basically, and to make sure that you obey some conventions, to make sure you don't gather too much text and too fast. A concrete example, like I actually managed to get banned from a few websites. Before I implemented it, it can happen. It definitely can happen. But it's not a law. It's more like a politeness rules between machines. Yeah.
We have a tendency to work a lot with Twitter because it's easy to get. The problem with Twitter is it changes. So if you try to look for the same tweets in a year, a lot of them will not be there anymore. Do you have any opinions on how to deal with this problem?
So the question is about disappearing Twitter data. I don't have a solution for this. The Library of Congress is supposed to have an archive of Twitter, but I don't know what they do with it, and I don't know if they delete the tweets when they are actually deleted. Everything is moving really fast. Yeah. So for the web, you have this really common practical resources, Internet Archive and Common Crawl. You can always use them. You can use your normal approach and then go to the Internet Archive in case you don't find anything. But for the tweets, it's unclear. You could archive manually the Twitter page, like also with the Internet Archive, you could save a screenshot or like a copy of the page at any given point in time, and then it would give you access to it backwards. But usually you don't know it. You don't know it will disappear, so you don't do it beforehand.
But apart from the more technical issues, do you think that what implications does that have for linguistic research?
Yeah, the implications for linguistic research are a problem of reproducibility of methods, because for instance, the web that people know that people knew in 2010 is already gone. So how are you to make research on how language on the web was in 2010? It makes this time difficult to access. So in the end, it's probable that there will be a kind of a paleontology of web linguistics where people will be specialized into how they get this data or what do they do with the little data that they have. But it will be the same kind of problem as in other disciplines where you have to find a theory of how language worked at the beginning of the 2000s without having that much data. And other than that, I think it's rather a scientific question of to find methods to do it, because data is sadly the data is gone. But just as a quick remark, also, like you have other kind of data loss, and that is research projects that don't archive their data, and then it's gone as well. And it's sorry, but it's more a question of research infrastructure, and now there are answers to this. But like how many people also for their PhD thesis or master thesis just gathered web data in the 2000s and didn't save it anywhere, and now it's gone. So I think it's also maybe it would be good to advertise a bit more this question among the students or among responsible like people in charge of research infrastructure, and try to find somehow a kind of repository or a kind of common memory, even if it's only for Germany, for instance, but where people can archive the data. Because even what's being used now, it's going to be somehow useful in 20 years. We need a way to preserve it. Mm-hmm.
I have a specific problem working in hate speech. The downside of all this legislation saying we have to take it down is that we can't access it anymore. So we have to be very careful in what we describe all the data that we need and then hang on to it because it will be gone tomorrow. And we're sometimes wondering, so what are we missing now? Or what are the things that we don't even notice because they're there for such a short time that we just can't grab them.
Yeah, it's a question also common to web archives projects. Like there are larger web archives in France, in Denmark, in London, so in the UK, for instance, and they're always trying to get their hands on contents that's disappearing sometimes faster. It's sadly a well-known problem. But I think what remains is still you still have a significant amount of things that remain. You also have like pages on the web that are made for memory or are made to remain. For instance, now that you have digital memorials to certain topics or for certain persons, or even in the form of a Facebook page, and this stays. So it's the problem is more for resources that are ephemeral in nature or disappear really fast. Yeah.
Okay, if there are no burning questions, you can still talk to us in the lunch break. I'd like to ask you to, we would like to thank you again.
Thank you.